So we're going to take a bit of a break from gardening and we're going to do some building today. And I'm building another coal frame, just like this one. It's going to sit on here and everything basically just fits on this raised bed base. And try to standardise the size of everything on my plot, so everything is in multiples of a standard base that's kind of that size there. This bed is kind of the exception because I just didn't quite have enough room to fit everything in, so it's slightly shorter than two of these beds over here. Anyway, I do have a kind of comprehensive guide to building all of these sorts of things, so low tunnels, coal frames, netted frames of all sorts of different types, and just standard raised beds, and you can find that a link in the description below. It's in the basics section of my ebook, and that's all the different bits and pieces that you need, all from the screws to the hinges, etc, etc. And so let's get on. So let's just go through the bits and pieces. So we do need some wood preserver because obviously, although this wood is treated, it's not pressure treated, it's surface treated, and obviously all these cut edges need preservative on them. And I'll put a couple of coats of this on, and also need to treat the cut ends, but for good measure I'll also treat the uncut ends. We need screws. Highly recommend stainless steel screws. Every other screw that I've tried basically just rots through after a few years, and it's really annoying when you try and take one of these to pieces and you find that all the screws have rotted. So I've got some 1.5 and 2 inch I think screws, and we'll need both of those. Little container to put the preservative in, paintbrush, and a little drill. Very noisy, this drill, so when I'm using it I'll go on silent. So I've double treated these cut edges, and now these end edges, which get the most weathered because this is going to be covered by the coal frame tops during winter and spring, so these need to go in here. I put them in for about 30 seconds while they soak up the preservative, and you can kind of see it soaking up, and hopefully it'll get about 3/4 of an inch into the wood or something like that, and that seems to be enough, to be honest. I've not had any problems with these rotting. I think they're going to last about 10 years. So while just waiting for this, we'll just talk about the economics of this. So this bed's about 4 square meters in size. I harvest about £40 worth of veg per year per square metre. So off a bed like this, £160 of veg a year. And this would cost me £80. It's going to last 10 years. So I'm going to harvest about £1,600 worth of veg, and the coal frames are costing me £80. So that's kind of the economics. It's pretty good, I think. And the economics is important for me. But what's more important is just the fun, just the fun of gardening year round, and the fun of, doing something that is a little bit unusual, and just having something to do in winter, really, to keep me interested on a day-to-day basis. So let's just talk about sizing. So these timbers, which are the short cross pieces, these are 6x2s, and I find this makes quite a difference to the rigidity of the whole structure, and also means that you're screwing in to nice thick timber, and since this is taking a lot of the strain, obviously this will rot less than the long edge pieces, which are only 6x1s, and I just do that for cost purposes. Obviously it would be nice to be able to afford to be able to use 6x2s for everything, but it dramatically reduces the price to be using 6x1s for the long edges. And to be honest, I've not really noticed any issues with doing that so far, so I think it's been a good decision, and I'll repeat that in 10 to 12 years when I have to replace these beds. Right, so I've just measured these planks to length. I don't mind the offcuts, I'm always using these offcuts for things. So that's all measured up. And this coal frame makes a nice saw bench. And so now I just need to treat those cut ends. Okay, so everything's now in position. I've just wedged that board so it holds the centre as well. And I've got my 9 screws, 2-inch screws. And I'm just going to punch these in the centres here. This wood's quite wet now because it's had the preservative on. So these screws go through here with no risk of splitting the wood, so you don't need to pilot hole them or anything like that. So I'm going to pop these in. So there's probably 1,000,001 better ways to do this than this way, but this way works for me. I built a lot of frames like this, never really regretted it, and I'm an 80-20 sort of person, so 20% of the effort, 80% of the benefit. So just do the others. Don't over tighten the screws. And then we just repeat that on the other side. Okay, so now we've got that segment on, we just need to put these end pieces on. And just latch them in place. So what I like to do now is just daub a bit more preservative on here, because that's where I'm putting the screws. And I get those 2-inch screws again. I don't need many. So now I just want to fasten this end in place, and I'm just going to do that just by putting a screw in here. Again, don't over tighten the screws because you don't want to split the wood. Just 2 screws. There's no kind of structural role really that these play, they just hold everything in place. And it is kind of surprising just how rigid this whole structure sort of ends up being with only a handful of screws. And that screw's only going to go in like, maybe half an inch or so, but that's enough. So you see that's really nice and rigid now. And then we just want the last back plate, and then using one of the offcuts, just made these little braces here just to make sure that the bottom and the middle and the top all connected together, and that makes sure that all this stuff won't blow away in the winter gales, and I have had that happen, so it's worth doing. And yeah, you don't need very much though, because the force of the wind isn't that great. Just this with 6 screws is enough to hold it all together. And for this you just want to be using the 2-inch screws. And you do just want to make sure that you just put a little bit of a batten underneath here, just so that this isn't resting on the soil or the wood chip. And then finally one little support just to make sure it doesn't flop around in the middle. And that is absolutely rock solid now. So I'm not going to make a top today, but the instructions for making the top are all in the link down below. And basically it's just polythene stretched over a frame that's made from slate battens with angled supports on the corners, and the polythene is just pulled tight and stapled. And these are still in good condition, again 7 years old. So I hope you enjoyed this little construction video. So this bed here is carrots. So this cold frame won't actually be used now until sort of late October, early November time, when I trim the tops off all the carrots. So I take off all the greens, leave sort of 2 to 3 inches of stem there. That will regrow, but it will leave plenty of space between the rows for me to put in spring crops like radishes and lettuces and turnips and all of that sort of thing in between the carrots. So my name's Steve, this is the Seaside Kitchen Garden and Allotment channel, and I'll see you soon.